Hey everybody, it's Professor Snart here. I thought I would check in with the talking head version of myself instead of a screenshot of our course, just to keep us on track as we move through our various units here. So I'm going to be looking at my screen and kind of back and forth with the camera here a little bit. Alright, so I'm recording this on Thursday morning, and our Unit 2 short fiction structure, where we're looking at the Freytag's pyramid kind of thing, then is due today, Thursday, Feb 2nd, and there is a reply component of that, so then we have till Sunday. But once you finish up like the Unit 2, the main work, you want to kind of multitask a little bit, do the reply stuff if you haven't done it already, and again keep in mind that if enough people have replied or have done an initial post by that Thursday, then you can get in and do the replies well before Sunday, so you don't always have to wait until that outside due date. But once you've done the main work, you want to then attend to the replies, but also move on to our next unit. So I would not recommend waiting around till after Sunday necessarily to start the next unit. So we do have a sort of, you're sort of in 2 units at once. Okay, so we finished up then Unit 2 for the most part, and now we move on to Unit 3. We're still in the short fiction part of our course. We have a couple of new readings to do that I'll look at in just a sec. And so we looked at fiction structure in Unit 2, and now for Unit 3 we want to look at a couple of other aspects of short fiction: character and setting. And we pull these things apart in a pretty artificial way, because obviously, especially in a good short story, they tend to work pretty seamlessly together. So setting, character, the plot that moves along, we can notice elements of those things, but they all sort of contribute to that overall effect. And of course, in the best circumstances, we sort of derive theme or meaning from the story, precisely in the way that those things work, not individually, but together. Okay. So Unit 3 then. So the new readings that we have are story Cathedral by Raymond Carver, The Lesson by Tony Cade Bombara, and Araby by James Joyce. None of them overly long, and I think what you'll see as you move through them is that they all share a few similarities in common, even if on the surface they appear to be quite different, whether it's different time frames, very different main characters, but there's a lot of kind of deeper connection in them. I have no particular favorite. I mean, I put them in here because, honestly, I like them all. Even if I dislike some of the people that we read about, like in Cathedral especially, you'll run into a fairly dislikable narrator. Hopefully he turns the corner at the end, but who knows. I think Araby is probably the most challenging of the stories, precisely because, and I remember my very first time reading this years and years ago, the James Joyce's style is such that he's so subtle that sometimes we read and nothing major seems to have happened. It's just a series of kind of events or pieces of information we get about things that happen. And so my first time reading it, I was reading and turning the pages, and I got to the end of the page, the bottom of the page, and I turned the page, and there was a new story on the next page, and I thought, oh no, there's pages missing, from my book somehow. But there wasn't. That was just the end of the story. And so it was pretty frustrating. I'm like, what did I just read? What happened here? And then, obviously, years and years and multiple readings later, I've come to really appreciate Joyce, and especially this story, precisely for how much he's able to communicate without ever seeming to come out and tell us, what's the theme of the story, or what's the emotional relationship between these various characters, or the overall kind of various themes that he's developing, or symbolism and that kind of stuff. So there's so much there, even though there appears to be so little there. What's really funny is that in my teaching demonstration, which was part of my job interview for this job that I have now, what story do I have to teach? Araby. So it's played this weird role in my life from very early on, when I was a student first reading it and thinking that my book was broken because I totally didn't understand the story, to it being part of my teaching demo that sort of got me the job that I have now. Assigning it to you. Right. Okay. So we have 2 really interesting things, I think, to do assignment-wise, and I'm going to talk about the second one, or the one that's lower in our Blackboard course, because it's a little more straightforward. A basic character comparison in a discussion board frame here So you're just taking two characters, different stories, and comparing them. We want to talk about similarities more than differences. You can maybe mention differences, but only if they're sort of surprising, because otherwise these characters are so similar. But telling us that two characters are different is not super interesting. We kind of already know that. So make sure you're focusing on similarities. And one of the most important skills that we can practice here is that of close reading. In other words, we can make a statement about a character, but we always want to support that with evidence from the text. So some people have that false notion that, stories, we just interpret them individually and they kind of mean whatever we want them to mean. And that's like really sort of attractive for some people about the study of literature, but really off-putting for others. It's like, can you just tell me like at least one right answer? So there is a mix of possible interpretations. That's true. There's very rarely just one correct thing to say that excludes all other possibilities. But the flip side is not that we can just say anything, and because we said it and that's our opinion, it's like true. So it's really interesting how the study of fiction, which might seem otherwise a sort of marginal academic pursuit, is really a practice in like the political rhetoric that we're part of like right now. Like, what's a fact? Can you have alternate facts? Can you have what's fake, right? What's true? So we never make that connection specifically like as part of our course, but I think it is something to think about, like how does the study of literature fit into a larger political discourse, or you becoming more fluent in terms of using language, a better reader, a better rhetorician, or better able to argue your point. Because fundamentally, while we have a range of interpretation, if we can't ground them in some proof from the text, right, we quote to support our point, then it's sort of hard to convince somebody that our interpretation is right. So I might say that the boy in Araby is clearly a conspiracy theorist. It would be really challenging, I think, for me to find evidence in the text, like a quote, to support that. I can opine it, right? I can provide it as my opinion, but it's not a very convincing literary argument. By contrast, though, we could go to the cathedral, and the main character there, or at least the speaker, he goes through what seems to be sort of a major epiphany, right? A moment of realization, a change at the end, but it's kind of iffy because they've been smoking weed and they've been drinking, and he's just kind of he's sort of a jerk. It's hard to imagine he's going to change overnight. I get it. We like to believe that people can change like that. But I think you could make two equally valid but counter arguments about that character. You could say that it's very unlikely that he changes because of, then list some reasons and cite from the text. Or you could say that he's clearly gone through this profound change and he's going to be different in the future, have a better relationship with his wife, be more open to new things and experiences and people based on, and then we could quote from the text. So notice again, it's like two, not just different, but like actually opposing interpretations, but we've grounded them both in evidence from the text. And that's where, again, it's important to like think about how we're using language here, how we're using evidence. So our assignment is focused just on the stories, of course, but I think there's larger significance there. So that's the one that's kind of down in the last part of our Blackboard, or our unit assignment here, character comparison. Again, it's set up as a discussion board, so there's a reply function, but you want to do your post first, and then you'll have access to others to reply. Okay. The other thing that is listed first here, because really it potentially takes longer, but in a weird sort of way, is a mobile assignment. So you're going to likely use your smartphone, or probably, almost inevitably you're going to use a smartphone. So we use, and this is focused more on setting. So we use a tool that I really like called Padlet, and there's a link then to the specific one in the description here. I've also embedded the thing itself in the unit, so as people find things with their phone, take a picture and then post it to the Padlet, it's basically like a digital corkboard. So it's a thing that we can stick pictures to, but we can all be in different places at different times. And if I find a picture, I can take it and post it it'll update, right? Someone else is on the other side of town, finds a picture, it'll all kind of collect in that one spot. So follow the link to use it on your smartphone, and I will text this out so you have it really handy. But you can always look at it too that way, but also in our Blackboard space as well. Okay, so what's the assignment? So obviously every story has a setting. It sort of has to, almost by default. The good stories have a setting that contributes to the theme, or that lends sort of tension to it, right? So setting isn't just where a story occurs. It has a much more definitive or important role than that. It's not just so we can imagine it somewhere. It's like, how does it play that bigger role? But it does then lend a kind of atmosphere. So sometimes setting is quite literal, like Dublin, Ireland, where Araby takes place. Sometimes, or like New York, where the lesson takes place. But sometimes it's less about the specifics and more just about like what's the atmosphere, what's the kind of condition that the characters are finding themselves in. So that's what our mobile assignment is going to ask you to do. Once you've read the stories, think about each of the settings, not specifically, so you're not going to go to New York and take a picture or just Google it. Don't do that. You're going to actually use your phone, and just in your everyday life, if you see a setting or find yourself in a scene that is obviously not going to be literally the same as what's in the stories, but kind of evokes a similar emotion or atmosphere or just that, right, that mood that we get from setting, I want you to take a picture of it. And Padlet's really nice because when it works, which is most of the time, you can be right on the Padlet and just click the button to add a post, and it'll let you take it. You don't have to take the picture and then later sit down at the computer and transfer it onto there. You can do that if you have technical issues, but as long as you've got that link to our Padlet, when you're out there in the world doing your thing and you see a setting or a scene that kind of evokes the mood from one of our stories, then you can take it right then and there. You go to the Padlet link, you press the little button to add, it'll prompt you to take the picture, and then you can add a little bit of text. Make sure you add your name, just so I know for grading purposes. But mostly we're just doing this as a mobile and a visual assignment. So the thing not to do is sit at your computer and find some old picture that you took, or even worse, just Google like Dublin, Ireland and post that. Don't do that. That's lame. It's totally not the point. Okay, so hopefully you get it. This is where capturing my screen is a little bit easier, but sometimes it's fun to do this too. Okay, but notice how, that's why I said the Padlet assignment takes kind of longer because you're out there on the lookout for things, and if you find something that's perfect, you know, early, that's great, but sometimes it takes a few days just doing our usual stuff to find something that that you think will really work well. But it doesn't take a long time in the sense that if you find it, you just like click, and then mostly it's done. So it takes a long time, but it doesn't take a long time at the same time. Okay, on that note, I am definitely done with this recording. If you have questions, concerns about the course, or whatever's going on, by all means be in touch with me, and I will talk with everybody soon.